Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever looked at a company and just wondered how they move so fast, how they're so innovative, while other companies just seem, well, stuck? Today, we're going to peek behind the curtain at the invisible architecture of success, how a company is structured.
So let's just jump right in with the big question. How does a company actually organize itself to win? It's not just about having an amazing product or hiring the smartest people. The way you arrange all those people, that is very often the secret ingredient. I want you to think about it like this. Every single organization has a kind of invisible architecture. It's a blueprint that decides how information flows, who makes the decisions, and ultimately, how quick and flexible that company can be. And that blueprint, it's the key to everything.
So why does this matter so much? Honestly, everything's on the line. The right structure can let a company change direction on a dime and just dominate a new market. But the wrong one? Well, the wrong one can get you tangled up in red tape and lead to so many missed opportunities, it doesn't matter how brilliant your team is.
All right, so let's start with the basics. We're going to look at the classic blueprints, the traditional building blocks that most companies have been using for decades.
So first up, we've got the functional model. This is probably the one you'd recognize instantly. It's where the company is all neatly sliced up into departments based on what they do. So you've got marketing over here, finance over there, HR in another corner, a classic old school company structure. The whole idea behind this model is expertise. Everyone knows who their boss is, there's a really clear chain of command, and it's fantastic for letting people become true masters of their craft, because they're always working with other specialists in their field. Okay, but what if your company makes a bunch of different products? Or maybe you serve totally different markets? Well, that's where the divisional model comes into play. With this one, the company is broken up into these semi-independent divisions, and each one acts almost like its own little company. Think of a massive conglomerate with totally separate divisions for, say, aviation, healthcare, and energy. So this model is all about focus and accountability. Each division is totally responsible for its own success, whether that's for one product line or a specific region of the world. And this makes the whole organization way more adaptable, because each division can react to its own market without waiting for headquarters. So when you put them side by side, you can really see the trade-offs, right? The functional model is great for building deep expertise, but it has this huge risk of creating silos, where the marketing team and the engineering team just don't talk to each other. On the other hand, the divisional model is super agile, but you might end up with redundant roles, like having 5 different marketing teams for 5 different divisions. It just goes to show you, there's no single best answer. It's all about picking the right tool for the job.
Of course, the business world got way faster, way more complex, and these traditional models, they weren't always enough. So companies started needing a more modern, more agile toolkit. And that brings us to the matrix model. Now, this is a really interesting hybrid. It tries to get the best of both worlds by mashing together the functional and divisional structures. So an employee might have a boss in their functional department, like engineering, but also report to a different boss for the specific project they're on. You see this all the time in big consulting firms.
The whole point here is collaboration. It literally forces people from different departments to work together. But, as you can probably guess, the big challenge is that when you report to 2 different bosses, communication has to be absolutely rock solid to avoid a ton of confusion and conflict.
All right, next in our modern toolkit is the flat model. And yeah, the name pretty much says it all. The goal is to just get rid of layers and layers of middle management, flattening the whole pyramid to speed up communication and decisions. This is the kind of thing you see a lot in fast-moving tech startups.
This kind of structure is all about empowerment. When you strip away all that bureaucracy, you give employees a lot more autonomy and responsibility, and that can make an organization incredibly agile, able to make decisions and act on them way faster than a traditional top-heavy company. And finally, we have the network model. Now, this is a very 21st century idea. Instead of trying to do absolutely everything in-house, a company will focus only on its core strengths, like design and marketing, and then it builds this whole network of external partners to handle everything else, like manufacturing.
So just picture a lean, central hub that coordinates with all these different specialists for logistics or distribution or whatever they need. This makes the company unbelievably flexible and scalable. It can grow or shrink its operations almost overnight without the massive overhead of a traditional organization.
Okay, so these models are great in theory, but to really get a feel for their power, you've got to see them in action. So let's look at a really cool real-world example, the music streaming giant, Spotify.
I mean, think about it. How does a company with thousands and thousands of employees constantly innovate and update its product? How does it stay so fast, so responsive?
Well, the answer is pretty brilliant. They took one of those modern blueprints we just talked about, the matrix model, and they gave it their own unique and very famous spin.
They call it the squad model, and here's how it works. First, you form a squad, which is just a small, self-sufficient team that basically acts like its own little startup. Then, you give that squad complete ownership over a specific feature, like the search bar or the playlist function. And finally, and this is the important part, you give them the autonomy to decide how to build it, test it, and release it.
And you know what? The results really speak for themselves. This decentralized model creates a culture of innovation because every squad is empowered to try new things. It drives accountability because each team owns its feature from beginning to end. And most importantly, it creates this incredible speed and responsiveness that lets Spotify constantly evolve.
That Spotify example just shows you how powerful a custom-built structure can be. And that really brings us to the biggest takeaway here. There's no magic bullet. There is no one-size-fits-all solution.
You see, the most successful companies today don't just pick one model off a shelf. They act like architects. They blend different elements from different models to create a custom blueprint that's perfect for their specific goals, one that's designed for maximum adaptability, innovation, and communication.
So that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. As technology and just the nature of work itself keep evolving at this crazy pace, what are the winning organizational blueprints of tomorrow even going to look like? It's something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me.